Welcome to episode 5 of Cool Cat Teacher Talk. We are talking about teacher self-care and good health. And you're going to find how it actually impacts our classrooms in positive ways.
Ever wondered how remarkable teaching happens? Find out right now at Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis. Get insights from top educators, tech tips, and inspiration to elevate your teaching.
First, we're going to talk to former principal Lana Penley from episode 865. She is author of Unlocking SEL. After her school burned down, she had to help her whole school cope with the tragedy, and she unlocked the importance of not only social emotional learning for students, but for teachers as well. And I want to point out, and I can't even believe I have to say this, but I am anyway, that her school's test scores actually went up. Today we have with us Lana Penley, author of Unlocking SEL, and that stands, of course, for Social Emotional Learning. Now, Lana, in your bio, in addition to all the research and all the things you've done, that you have a deep, heartfelt commitment to social emotional learning. So what took you to the point that you would actually say in your bio that you have a heartfelt commitment to social emotional learning?
I was a principal for more than a decade. And just like many principals, I felt I was trained in principal school, raise test scores. Like that's what I was hired to do. The principal out in Portland, Oregon. And in my second year of the principalship, we had a crisis of a school fire during the school day. Literally, our school burned down. Everybody was okay, but you could just imagine the stress, the panic, the crisis, everything that came from that.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I realized, like, I'm just going about this all wrong. This is not who I want to be. This is not the kind of school I want to lead. Let's do it differently. And so our whole staff used that crisis as the time to just, let's pause and let's kind of like reimagine what schooling could be. And so we really focused on community and healing and connection, basically all the components of social and emotional learning. Now, this was 2009, so it was a little early. Not a lot of people were using that language, but that's exactly what we were doing. And over time, we had some pretty amazing results. And now with this book, I just want to take the message out to the larger educational world. Like, we've got to do school differently.
In some ways, it burned down your vision of what you thought school was and helped you reconstruct what school is, because isn't it all about relationships?
It is absolutely. Yes. There's a little bit of a Phoenix mantra in there, right? Like,
yeah,
we did burn down and came back. But it's interesting how somehow that gets trained out of us. And then we have to kind of find our way back to relationships. And it is absolutely about relationships, and relationships with students, but also relationships between the staff, relationships with ourselves. It's just all about that from the very beginning.
You know, every time I talk to a teacher who wants to quit, it's because they've lost that relationship and they're like, this is not what I signed up for. And they'll point at all the paperwork and they'll point at all the grading and they'll point at all this and they're like all the demands and all, and you're just like, it's because they're missing that relationship. I mean, that's what we're in it for as teachers. It's what students want.
Funny thing, Vicki, when I started, we started just with students. And we quickly realized we were leaving behind 70 folks that had also been through a traumatic experience, myself included. And we realized it has to be this parallel path. It has to be. And once we started that, it was amazing, the shifts and the change. We all practice relationships. We all practice stress reduction. We were all doing mindfulness, and we had significant changes in that. And I remember literally Googling adult SEL and nothing came up. They're like, there are no findings for that word. And boy, have times changed, but we are nowhere near where we need to be in far as supporting our educators.
Well, I know it has to upset you because, there's been some political controversy around social emotional learning. And there's some people who've attached themselves to SEL that it may not actually even be SEL, because there are some people who say, well, I can't say SEL in my school anymore. We just talk about life skills. What does that debate sound like in your own head as you start thinking about the people who are saying, oh, we can't use that word anymore?
Yeah, I hate that in some ways it has been politicized, because what my experience was in our school, it really was about kindness and connection. And can't we just all get behind that, regardless of where we stand on other things? That is such a misconception about social and emotional learning. How do we create these kind places, healthy, happy schools where students and staff can thrive? That to me is social and emotional learning.
As we were recording this, I've got Hurricane Helene barreling down. And next week, when I go back to class, I will have kids who have experienced trauma. And that if I jump right back into teaching whatever I was teaching yesterday, that will be a mistake, because not only will they not have the capacity to learn what I was teaching yesterday, there's a whole other bit of baggage. So where did you even start as you realized I have a whole school who's gone through trauma? Because truthfully, when you have a hurricane, you get a whole school who's gone through trauma.
Well, interesting enough, I kind of think about the pandemic was like everybody had a school fire. Like every school went through a crisis. And then there's a lot of those that continue, whether it's a lockdown drill, God forbid, some sort of safety event, a hurricane. There's all of these stressors that are happening on schools. And so what I see when I visit schools around the country, a lot of dysregulation, a lot of disconnection. And so as I mentioned earlier, we have to start there. Like just bringing back the humanity, the joy, the play, the connection to make schools places where teachers and students want to be. I mean, don't you want to work in a school like that? I know I do.
I do. Well, if you were my principal, what would be the first thing you would say at the staff meeting? Okay, what are we going to do this week? What are we going to do now that we've just had a trauma experience at our school to start getting that into our classrooms?
Well, I would first recognize the humanity of the adults and provide time for them to connect with each other. How was that for you? What was your experience? Because maybe we had a teacher who had a super traumatic situation and we can't pretend like that's not there. So that's the first thing, is I was provide some space to talk about what happened. And then I would provide space for, okay, how do we support our teachers? And then how do we now support our students in this? How do we provide time for them to talk about, or at least give them the option to talk about what they experienced? What was real for them? What was it like for them? With an option to pass, of course, but just doing some sort of circle time where they could really just connect about what life was like and what they just went through. But pretend like it didn't happen. Of course, age appropriate, but that's not the way to go either, right? Like, okay, get started on your math. You're like, wait, I just went through a hurricane. Right? Like I need to think about, we need to process, we need to talk about this. And then we would do some sort of mindful practice to help them feel a bit calmer and more connected in their bodies before we even started focusing on academics.
And of course, the academics and the sense of normalcy is a good thing. That's part of the healing. So we're not saying like, don't do anything but talk about all you went through. I mean, there is some comfort in, okay, I'm getting to work. We're hearing this together. We're moving forward. So there's a balance there, isn't there?
Absolutely. And I think that's really important, and a misconception some folks have, like social emotional learning. Oh, we're just going to be like woo woo all day long. No, it's like this soft start, right? We're just softly beginning our day, helping students find a safe place to land. And when they're feeling connected, brains are calm, we're opening for learning. That's when we step right in. Interesting enough, our scores went up, which is not surprising, probably to educators, that when the students feel safe, their brains can open, and that's when they can learn.
And when the teachers feel safe.
Yes.
Because we all need that.
We all need that. And actually, the book is about 5 keys to social and emotional learning. The second key is adult SEL, even before we get to the classroom. Because I really believe we have to move upstream. We found that out ourselves. And that's what I coach schools on around the country. We've got to both practice self-care and collective care, but also systemic care in a better way in education.
Do you want to take us through your 5 keys?
All right, I will. Thank you for that. Begin with the foundation. That's the first thing I would start. So how do we create the basic knowledge of what social and emotional learning is? Just like we had mentioned earlier about some of the misconceptions and what is it? What does the research tell us about it? Then we go into what are the adult things we can do? How do we support teachers with stress reduction, workload management, feeling community and connection? Then we move into, okay, let's come into the classroom. What are some specific SEL strategies that we can use in the classroom? Then we say, okay, now we take it school-wide. So rather than we just have one class doing it or this class doing it, how do we implement school-wide? And then the fifth key, how do we keep it going? Not initiative overload, not we do this and now we're going to do that. How do we get deeper and it gets better each year?
So now that we understand how important it is that teachers take care of themselves as well as their students, I'd like us to talk to Tinashe Blanchet, co-author of the Startup Teacher Playbook. She's going to share a method she teaches teachers to help them determine the specific issue of concern so that you can improve things and you can have a sense of forward progress. This is from episode 764. Are you an upset teacher? How to understand what is wrong.
As we all know, we have a lot going on, and it's great to be able to use PD time to do something for your students, to push things forward, if you will. So one thing we noticed as we run workshops or we've gone into schools is, what is it that makes some teachers fired up and ready to go? And what is it that's holding other teachers back? And we started kind of looking and noticing, what is it about kind of people's attitude that encouraged them or set them off or kind of made them hesitant? And so we came up with this list of 5 traits that we notice when they get nurtured, help teachers be able to just hit the ground running. And when they get neglected, they cause that hesitancy or that inability to kind of do something with those ideas. So the 5 traits are heart, optimism, curiosity, confidence, and vulnerability. And what we did is kind of notice what happens, whether it's we do it to ourselves or whether it's because of the culture we're in. So it's something that maybe leadership might need to look at that prevents us from doing things. So for instance, with heart is just, it's when you believe in what you're doing, right? Like, so when you're doing it for the right reasons, that's your heart telling you like, oh, I want to make a difference for the kids. And when you feel like you're making a difference for the kids, you want to keep going. So when heart is being nurtured, you have your joy and your purpose. Your students are usually at the center because that's usually why most teachers went into teaching, right? They want to make the difference. The kids mean everything. When heart kind of gets ignored or neglected, you sometimes are doing things you don't believe in, and it can cause that kind of negativity. You get caught up in activities that really don't matter to you or you don't think really add a lot of value. So your purpose isn't being met, and therefore your students' needs aren't being met. And this can cause you to stop caring. And so we kind of went through these 5 different traits because we noticed if administration or leadership want certain projects to move forward, are you nurturing these traits in teachers? And then for teachers, if there's certain things you want to be doing, are you really doing what you want to be doing? And do you still believe in yourself? And this kind of created a quick like self checklist, if you will, so that you can see where you're at and maybe some things you might need to work on. So for instance, curiosity, do you need to get your own sense of learning back? Are these some things like where you're not making time for yourself? Vulnerability is another one. Are you doing things that you believe in? Or are you kind of doing it because you feel like everyone's pushing you to do that? And that way it's kind of a way to self-check and make sure you're doing what you think is right.
Okay, so we've talked about heart and we talked about curiosity, we talked about vulnerability. So what about optimism? What happens when your attitude is flagging?
For us, optimism is really still believing that you matter, and your actions matter and that you can make a difference. So when this is nurtured, you can handle adversity. Just because there's a roadblock, you're going to keep pushing because that your actions are going to make a difference. When this gets ignored and you don't believe your actions matter or that change is possible, you become stagnant. And so that's what we focus on with optimism.
Okay. And then how about confidence?
So yeah, confidence. Do you still believe in your voice? So when you lose your confidence, you usually don't push yourself. You don't speak your mind. You kind of have that thing like, oh, why should I be the one doing it? You doubt yourself. And so this is the reason confidence is so important, because we've been in many workshops where we'll have that teacher. It's like, yeah, they have this great idea, right? And you're like, yeah, go for it. And it's like, no, I don't know if I'm the one. or they'll be scared to talk to an administrator, to a colleague about it. And it's like, no, we need you. And that's why it's so important that we nurture confidence in ourselves and believe in our abilities.
So what do you do? Like, for example, one of them, you said you need to make time to do such and such. Well, there's a lot of demands on teachers right now. And if you told me to make time for something, the only way I could do that is so a lot of mornings I'll go in at 6 a.m., 6:30, here late, is stay another hour. But that's not good either, is it? I mean, there's never time to say, I got to go home.
No, so time is such a huge issue. Time is the number one barrier for teachers. So there's a lot of things you can do to kind of prioritize your time. So for instance, one thing is, what are your guiding principles? So when you look through this, what are those initiatives that don't add value to you or to your students? And how can you not take those as seriously? That's the way to save time.
That's how it is. I mean, if it's the initiative du jour of the month, then you kind of feel like you're supposed to.
But how seriously do you need to take it, right? And so those are some of the things where we've noticed you can save time, because time's one of those loaded things. So yeah, you have the things that are kind of mandated that you got to do. Students, there's always something new that's going on that sucks out 30 minutes of your day that you didn't see coming, parent emails, and so on and so forth. So time is one of those loaded issues that you can just get on your own, because there's so many components to it, right? There's what's being mandated on you, like what's school culture like, and how is leadership respecting your time? And then there's also what we can do to respect our own time, right? So like just simple things and when we talk about managing kind of priorities, how often are we on social media? Do you limit how often you check your email? Are you putting together tasks so it's more feasible for you? Like I always love doing projects, for instance, in class, where in order to give feedback, it would be like work time. But at the same time, the kids were getting stuff done. I was going group to group and giving feedback. And for me, that always saved way more time than writing tons of comments at home. So there's always ways to manage time. But I feel like that's a whole nother beast.
Oh, yeah. So what do you say to the teacher who driving home from work today or yesterday was writing her resignation letter in her head? What do you say to that teacher to figure out where they are and how to move forward?
So that's the thing. You go to your heart. Do you still believe in what you're doing, right? Like, do you still believe that you're making the difference? And I think that's why we have a lot of teachers resigning right now, because a lot of teachers went in to make an impact for kids. So I think it's reflecting and giving themselves a chance to reflect, like, do I still like the job? Am I in the right school? And then if I am in the right school, I still believe in what I'm doing, kind of thing. What do I need to do to rejuvenate myself so I feel good? And sometimes putting ourselves on the to-do list is just a must, because when we were just talking about time, like productivity guilt's a big thing, right? Like we always feel as teachers, as parents often, that we should be doing more. So just giving our chance to reflect and feeling satisfied and putting ourselves on that to-do list. So we take time to nurture our needs. So that oxygen tank cliche, so that we can keep going.
Put ourselves on our to-do list. That can be a challenge, but it is necessary for all of us. And I hope that we'll all go back and consider heart and curiosity and vulnerability, optimism and confidence.
This next talk is precious to me. It was recorded in June of 2022 at a time where I was learning to walk again. I had broken my foot and had foot surgery, and wow, it was such a difficult time. Honestly, I had to press pause on just about everything in my life and take care of myself. And you know what? When that happens, there is no guilt. If you can't walk, you can't go do all the things. And I'd like to say that right now, as I'm recording this episode, Hurricane Helene is barreling down South Georgia and beyond. We have other things going on, family, health issues, and even more. So there are storms, and you have those storms too. And I think that's why teachers get so mad at the term self-care, because sometimes they feel like that the people saying, take care of yourself, are the people who gave them the extra duties and who made the storms that happen in the first place. And it makes them very angry. But let me talk to you about what self-care is in the storm. So the last storm that came through, Hurricane Michael, left my home without power for 2 weeks, without water for several weeks, and we didn't have HVAC for 2 whole months. Yes, the temperature actually got down to 17 degrees when that happened. And we were huddling around the fireplace, and It gave me such empathy for so many situations we just don't think about typically here in the United States. So to me, self-care is considering the things to take care of your future self. So some of the things we've been doing, my son has worked with our chainsaw. Does it crank? We went ahead and got charcoal for the grill. I've even looked and found my AeroPress for the coffee so that I can make coffee even without electricity. I am doing things that my future self will thank me for. And when I get really tired as a teacher, sometimes I'll stop and say, okay, now I can go to this event tonight and I can be really, really busy. But what is the tomorrow Vicki going to say about the decision I'm making? So to me, self-care is understanding that there are storms as part of being human. We have the storms. The storms will come. The storms will happen. And you know what? Comfort for me is not something that I'm going to pursue at all costs because comfort is unrealistic. Hard things happen, and I do want to serve and help others. But that starts by serving and helping myself. So today, I'm making sure I cook all that homemade bread that I've got, making sure I drink plenty of water. I'm going ahead and taking a shower. So if I don't have water for a few weeks, that I can deal with that. I'm doing all the things that my future self will thank me for. And so part of self-care is understanding that you are taking care of yourself today, so your future self will thank you. And for me, that is not a selfish thing, that if I am exhausted or can't see straight because I'm so upset and haven't taken care of myself, then that makes it harder for me to take care of our own needs tomorrow, whatever tomorrow holds. Within 24 hours, I'll know what we're dealing with, that's for sure. So I want to be in the state of mind that I can be healthy to take care of ourselves and take care of our home. But if the good Lord allows us to not have any damage this time, I want to get up and make some peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for my neighbors and have charcoal to share with them. So you can't take care of others if you don't take care of yourself. It's not a selfish thing at all. It's a very practical thing. There are things that you can only do for yourself. Get yourself to sleep, eat some good food, do something fun. And I was talking about kind of the storms of life a couple days ago before we even knew this hurricane was coming. And my sister said, you know what? You're tired. You need to get some sleep tonight. You need to take some vitamin C. You need to eat a good dinner. You need to maybe watch a happy movie or something. And so I watched The Amazing School Janitor win America's Got Talent. And you know what? That made me really, really happy. That was a happy moment. I was glad I got to see it. So these are things that are part of taking care of yourself so your future self will thank you. And so your future self is able to take care of others. So now we are moving to an interview with Stephanie Dorsey and some very personal things I created in my own season of struggle. I hope all of these help and encourage you. This is episode 786 with Stephanie Dorsey, 6 sustainable self-care tips for teachers. So let's start, Stephanie. Everybody keeps saying, teachers, you need to take care of yourself, take care of yourself, take care of yourself. And then you teach all day long and you're subbing for everybody and you lose all your planning period and you're working late and you take work home and you're exhausted. Like, where do we start?
I definitely feel like that is something that we're always told as teachers. You have to take care of yourself. You have to work out. You have to eat better. But in actuality, it's like, do we take ourselves out of the picture of other people's lives? Like, we encompass so many responsibilities as teachers. We're caretakers to students. We're supportive to our colleagues. We have families. We have other responsibilities. And how do we prioritize? And that's really where I have found that when I'm looking at self-care is what can I do in bite sizes? Attack everything. Like, yes, I know I need to eat better, but when I go to the teacher's lounge, that cookie looks darn good. And maybe I need that little sugar to give me energy for my next class. But don't feel guilty about that. So that is one thing. Prioritizing yourself, that is my first tip, is saying to yourself, what do you need in that moment that is going to work for you and that you can keep doing? So first, prioritizing small little things. So what I mean about that is don't look at, okay, maybe I do need to eat better, but what can I change during the day? Like maybe instead of I want that cookie. Maybe during the lunchtime, instead of meeting a student, I'll take that time for myself and walk with a colleague, walk around the gym. Because we know as teachers, physical activity is important, right? It keeps our mind engaged. It keeps us sharp. We got to be sharp with those kids in those classrooms. That physical activity is important. But again, don't let that define you. So if you create a habit, make sure it's something that you can do. And I learned that a lot. I had a struggle being a 20-year special education teacher of taking that time, and it hurt my health. And so I took a self-care class and the self-care strategies and like how to balance that. We wear so many hats that I'm like, how do I take care of myself when I want to take care of everybody else, including my family that I was neglecting, like bringing my homework home, and my homework meaning grading or my IEPs. So how did I stop that? For me, and I'm going to say this, is really looking at your time. And I did this wheel of time where I put in my whole day, what I did when I woke up to when I went to bed. And I put it in categories of, is this emotionally good for me? Am I physically doing it? This is mental. What is this doing for me every day? Is it reducing my stress? Is it making me finish things quicker? I had to really think about that. But I think as a teacher, we do that very well for others. We help others prioritize themselves, help others be efficient during the day, but we have to take that time for us.
Somewhere in 2020, I broke my foot. And I was so busy taking care of distance learning, taking care of the kids, taking care of all the teachers that I did not stop and get it seen about. And as we're recording this yesterday, I'm just now back in shoes, which is awesome for me. But I had surgery February 25th of 2022, and I could not walk again until May 4th of 2022. So I had 10 weeks of not walking, 3 weeks in school where I couldn't walk. And it was because I didn't stop to take care of myself. And one thing I have learned is, for example, now, if I'm exhausted, I go to sleep. Like, what kind of good am I doing myself sitting there looking at work for kids and nodding off and fighting the sleep and drinking coffee at 11 o'clock at night so I can stay up till 3 and grade? That is not sustainable. So I think we just have to draw those lines and say, you know what? Doctor visit has to happen. Everything else will happen. But if I'm dead or if I'm at home not walking, I can't do everything else. And I think that's what all of us as teachers have to understand, is that we have a choice to make and nobody is going to make it for us. We have to make it for ourselves. And that is, I need to go to the doctor. I'm going to go to the doctor. I need to take a walk. I'm going to take a walk. I need to eat. I need to go to bed. All of those decisions, I think, are really important.
Yeah. And I think that's step one, is knowing your worth. Like, that is something that is the hardest thing, being very self-aware of that. Like, you knew you were injured, but you didn't put yourself first. You walked on it, and now your steps back from 4, right? Or are you walking?
I actually ran a half marathon on it.
So you even took it to where you did something that you wanted to do, but were injured.
I was injured, yeah. And we do that, though. As teachers, we are just so used to just push. And then there's another piece I know that you're getting ready to talk about is I ran because it was how I handled stress.
Yes. And the stress, those are the triggers, right? Like, we talk about, there are these triggers. We know it could be a person, it could be a place, it could be a situation. My trigger was always right before an IEP meeting. So my trigger is I didn't sleep well. I was thinking too much. Like you, I had to start doing some rituals, some habits to prevent me from being at the highest level of my stress before an IEP level. So I knew what triggered me. It was those meetings. Even though I knew I was going to be fine, I still kept working on it and working on it to a point where my colleague was like, Stephanie, it's fine. You're ready. Stop adding more. Stop doing more. Get some rest. So she suggested for me is to start keeping a journal by my bed. So I kept a journal by my bed, and I do that now, and I consistently do that. If I have something this is funny, I'm going to go see the Strawberry Moon, and I'm going to kayak. I know how to kayak, but I'm stressed because it's at night. Last night I couldn't sleep on it, so I was in my journal just writing like positive things. So good self-talk, right? So that's part of when you have a trigger, how to de-escalate yourself. So I use a journal. I do positive self-talk, but those are all things you have to learn how to do. So last night I was like writing in my journal. My husband's like, why is the light on? It's 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, I have to get this out of my system. I'm paddling in the dark soon. It's kind of like that. I think we have to understand what triggers us. And it could be simple as we're starting an hour later today at school, right? Like, well, I guess it was like flex days where we could start later. That actually, some teachers, that really throws them off because they have rituals and they have routines, and now everything's moved back an hour. So I would look at your calendar, like when those flex hours come, and say to yourself, what could I do to prepare me differently that day? How will I react to it? Because again, we're very proactive. Teachers really do look ahead, and we are flexible. But when we have routines that we're used to and you change our routine, we stress and it does trigger us.
Okay, so first you had prioritizing yourself and setting up those wellness routines. Second is understanding your stress triggers, which we've all got to understand those, cope with them appropriately. I journal also. Journaling has just been such an important part of my whole life and highly recommend that. So as you're facing your own storm, I hope that you will intentionally do things to take care of yourself. I also thought about what my mom always told me. Vicki, when you're having a hard time, find someone to serve. So I'm serving you right now, I hope. I want to encourage you right now. You watching or hearing this show is not an accident at all. You might be a teacher, a parent, or just some random person who came across this show. This is your call to be kind to yourself, even if you have a storm coming on the outside or you have a storm on the inside. Now, I'll admit, after Hurricane Michael, when we had trees down, we were in survival mode, and we had to cut the trees so we could get out of the house and even go to the store. And believe it or not, I watched those old videos so that I could remember all the things that we needed to do. And I've been posting on Facebook, nostalgia posts about what I remember that was helpful. There's times that we have to do what my Granny Martin always said and let the rough end drag. And that term came from when they used to haul wood from town. Sometimes they would overload the truck with the wood just so they could get it way out of the country. And sometimes the wood on the bottom would kind of fall down and drag on the ground. And you know what? They needed all that wood. And so they let the rough end drag. That's where that came from. And that is kind of like life. So part of self-care is being kind to yourself. As a teacher, very often in May with my 3 children, I would get so upset because I do like to cook good food. I like to eat good food and I like to cook good food. And so I found it really hard to cook any meals in May, and I would feel so guilty. And my mom would tell me, Vicki, you've got to let the rough end drag. And then she would say something I've never forgotten. Vicki, remember that your kids would rather have pizza with a happy mom than a gourmet meal with a witch. And I have taken that with me. Now, all of these things I've been sharing with you are the ways I'm intentional about taking care of myself. I get out my Bible, I sit down and pray, I drink a good cup of coffee. I write things I'm grateful for in my journal every day. I write poetry, I talk to my sisters or my friends. I do things like write this show and record things that I hope will be helpful to at least another person. And I believe my pain is not wasted when I use it to help somebody else. Another thing that my mom always said is you can throw a pity party, but nobody's going to show up. She said, if you want to go on a guilt trip, you got to pack your own bags. And yes, I had an amazingly smart mom, and she passed away in the pandemic and had dementia. But I still have those sayings with me. And part of taking care of myself as the storm is coming, I'm relying on the wisdom of the people who love me and have been there before me. And I care about all of you listening, and I want you to live a better life too. So right now, we're going to talk about intentional ways we take care of ourselves with Sarah Parker Wolf, author of Daily Intentions for the Classroom Teacher, and episode 741, How Teachers Can Be Intentional About Self-Care.
Now, Sarah, first we want to talk about what are some important reasons to be intentional?
Well, if we think about it, I mean, we would never go into a classroom without a lesson plan, right? I mean, we would never send our kids off all different directions and not have a plan for them, not have something for them to focus on every day. But how often do we do that for ourselves? And it seems like if you don't have that, at least this was my personal experience, that it's so easy to go through your day just in your default mode. You know, that kind of fun thing when you drive to work and you don't remember how you got there because you went the same way every day, did the same thing every day. And I mean, let's face it, we're under a lot of stress. And so it's great to just take a step back and go into your day every day, or maybe think about it the night before about what am I really doing this week? What is in it for me as a person? What can I do for a little bit of self-care? Am I really thinking about how I'm presenting myself to my students and really being my authentic self for them? Or am I just sleepwalking through the whole thing? And so the idea is that just like I think about all those principals who walked into my classroom from time to time and, where is your objective and where is your agenda? And we've got this whole list of to-dos, but what is our objective? What are we really focused on? How do we want to better ourselves, both as teachers and as people? And just, feel good about what we're doing every day, because it's so easy to get caught up in just all the craziness and let it slip by.
Well, we have to be intentional, but how can we be intentional about being intentional? Give us some examples.
Well, what I like to do is kind of take a theme for the week, because, the day can go by so fast and sometimes you miss something. We all kind of hear all these kind of catchphrases going around, we have to focus on gratitude, or we have to think of positive things. And that is a big part of it. And those are great things to think about. But I think we can expand it a little bit. And I think by just taking a small piece of each one of these kind of intentional themes each day makes it not so overwhelming. So you're like, okay, I'm supposed to be grateful every day, all day long. Instead, let's just take, on Sunday, let's be grateful that I know what I'm teaching tomorrow. On Monday, let's be thankful for the fact that I was able to get up and get my kids off to school before I got there and everything went smoothly. So, or I'm grateful just for the fact that I have a job, or I am grateful for the fact that I have a family or I have friends. And so to take just those little things, it just gives us a little bit more focus instead of just saying, I'm going to be grateful. But we can also expand that, think about what if you take a whole week and you think about eating and be intentional about your eating. And I don't mean I need to lose 10 pounds, but to be intentional about the fact that your eating is fuel for what you're doing all day long. And if you're feeling run down, or you're feeling like by the time you get to 3:00, you're about ready to fall over, are you taking time to back down and actually eat at lunch? Are you, one day, can you focus and say, just this one day, I'm going to go eat lunch with my colleagues and enjoy it. Or just this one day, I am going to eat mindfully, not shove something into my face and be done in 10 seconds.
Which that can be very challenging. And so each of your weeks has a theme, and that's kind of interesting, things like relationships, laughter, heartache. That's a difficult one. Give me an example of one of the ways you can be intentional about heartache, because that almost feels like focusing on the negative, but we all have them, right?
Right. I think the one that sticks out the most for me, that it was actually kind of difficult to write, I had a colleague once who told me, be careful when you get close to kids, they'll break your heart. I taught high school for a very long time. And, there are kids that don't make it, that get in trouble, that let you down, disappoint you, make the wrong choices. But to step back from your disappointment, to step back and think about those kids and think about how you grew as a person and as a teacher, having known them. And I think there's another piece in there with heartache, with, when something happens in your life, not that you have to share every detail with your students, but to show them that you're human and how you can step back and have a response to something that touches you. It shows them that that's okay. We're the models for everything we do. They're watching. And so I purposely put the book that you didn't have to use a certain theme on a certain day, meaning like this isn't January 5th and this isn't February 8th or whatever, because sometimes you're like, everything's going great. I don't want to read about heartache. I don't need to be intentional about that right now. But when it does happen, when it does take you by surprise, sometimes stepping back and saying, okay, somebody else thought this too. And it's okay that I feel this, and I don't have to be this statue of everything's going to be okay all the time. And I can see the lesson in something, or I can see what I took away from it. Doesn't take it away, but maybe it's just the idea of working through it.
Well, there's so many important things, and I really want to talk about another things that we need to be intentional about, and that is assuming good intentions. You know, people who go through life being paranoid are never disappointed.
That's correct. That's correct.
They're never disappointed because they are constantly expecting people to stab them in the back. But I think I found they're constantly, I don't know, I'm not going to judge because I have had times of paranoia myself. So how can we get back to assuming good intentions?
I think when we just read about it, you know, when you take a minute and you read that little blurb that said, boy, she took my stuff off of the copier and just steals everything that I do. And instead of looking at something that way, to take a minute to read that little intention for the day and say, oh, wait a minute, maybe she needs my help. Or maybe she just really thinks I'm really good at my job. And to take that and think, you know, maybe this is something that I can work with. Maybe it's something that I can address without being paranoid, as you said. I think the whole point is that reading that reflection and reading that intention kind of stops us in our tracks and brings us into that present moment. And kind of is self-examining in that, what am I really thinking right now? And is it really true? Or is it, you know, your mind just spiraling all of this stuff? But it's meant to really just slow us down and think of a response instead of a gut reaction all the time. But I agree, that's exactly what it is. It's the, you know, oh, she wants my job or he wants to get me in trouble with this person. And a lot of it is what we are imagining, not what we know.
Well, and a lot of it is assuming good intentions with our students.
Absolutely. And that assuming from the get-go that that child wants to learn. And, you know, if there is a barrier there, it is something that can be addressed and something that can be overcome. But to not go in and say, oh, you know, he doesn't want to be here and he doesn't like me. And, you know, but there's that in the book too.
I just don't think that people go to work to do a bad job or students go to school to do a bad job. I think that deep down, we all want to do a good job. Now we can lose our hope. Right. We can get frustrated. We can feel like, oh, it's just never going to work out with me and that teacher. But I just think that deep down, most kids and most adults want to be successful in the learning experience. So let's finish up with a really cool one, an idea for living large.
Yes. I think so many times teachers are so tired and so, you know, pressured to do testing and all these things that are, you know, thrown at them left and right, that we forget that we have these wonderful, big, beautiful ideas to just transform our classrooms and to transform the way that we reach students. And we've all got it. We're all beautiful, creative human beings. There's no way it's not. But we stop ourselves thinking either somebody's not going to support us or, oh, that's too much work or I don't have time. So what these intentions do under living large is just that we stop and we consider it. You know, maybe we don't do the whole thing, but to not dismiss, to take the time to think or write down or really just take a minute to think through all those ideas that you've got bubbling up in there and maybe take a chance on one. And you know what? Maybe it goes completely wrong and it's horrible and it's okay. And because once again, when you do that with intention and you even share that intention with your students, if it fails miserably, they know that that's okay. And we all learned something from it and we can move forward, you know, but it was worth the risk because we learned something from it.
Yeah. So the book is Daily Intentions for the Classroom Teacher by Sarah Parker Wolf. This is what I'm going to have on my desk. I love being intentional. I like the ones about leaving Post-it notes for myself on Fridays. There's just so many different exciting things that are in this book. So thanks for sharing with us, Sarah. And remember, teachers, be intentional. I know for me, I have planned my ideal week. I have been intentional about planning and when am I going to work out. I actually just worked out right before Sarah and I got on, so I'm a little bit flushed still, but you know, that's just what we have to do. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy it. And I hope we all just take that time for ourselves and to really see things through that we want to accomplish.
One last thing that I want to talk about. Sometimes when we struggle and we get overwhelmed, we can procrastinate. And one of my very popular recent shows is with my friend Tinashe Blanchet, and it was episode 853, Practical Ways to Overcome Procrastination. So as we talk about self-care, sometimes the best thing you can do is get that thing off your list that is bringing you down. For me, I got frustrated the other day. I had a big stack of papers and I needed to clean them off of my home desk, this clean desk that those of you watching on TV or YouTube can see behind me. Well, I've been looking at papers for a long time and it was a big mess. And so I had to get up early in the morning yesterday to clean up all these papers so that I could tape these episodes for you yesterday and today. And as I was cleaning them up, I was thinking, you know what? It's actually going to feel really good to get these papers up. I mean, I'm not happy I kind of lost my temper and threw my papers around my office, but I am happy that I'm going to have a clean office. And so, you know what? I cleaned up all those papers and it was just so freeing. And I realized that when we deal with procrastination, we're giving our future selves a gift. So sometimes self-care is doing that hard thing today that your tomorrow self will thank you for. I hope you enjoy this episode. We're actually going to talk about a really important topic, procrastination. A lot of people are struggling with this right now, right?
Yes. Honestly, I think a lot of people don't think that it's a problem, right? I can think of at least 3 people right off the top of my head, some of my close friends who are professionals, educators, who think that procrastination is totally fine. And, you know, I've heard people say, I have to wait until the last minute so that I can feel inspired. But I'm really at a point in my career where I just don't want to procrastinate anymore. So I'm really actively working on it.
When you study procrastination, successful people procrastinate the right things and tackle the right things. That procrastination can hit all of us. Like we know we have something we need to do. And for me, when I know I have something I need to do, I like to split it down into smaller tasks. I have a laundry basket I don't want to fold. Yesterday, I folded 5 things out of the basket. This morning, I folded 5 things out of the basket. Like, how do you tackle procrastination?
Well, that's something that I've been thinking about a lot. Is how do you face overwhelming tasks? So as an educator, a lot of times just planning a lesson can be a really overwhelming task. I'm currently working on my PhD in math education at Auburn. I'm taking my classes. There are times where I have to teach lessons. And so when I know that I have a lesson that I need to teach, rather than doing what I used to do in my backsliding days, which is the night before, you know, scribble in into that lesson plan template, whatever I'm required to do, I'm really using Google Tasks to say, okay, let me break this down into pieces. And so the first piece would be to take like whatever lesson. So just giving myself time, like maybe a few weeks before I need to teach the lesson, to sit down and just read what's been presented to me and annotate it. So I was looking at a lesson the other day and I realized, oh, this would be really cool with Desmos. It would be really great for me to design the Desmos classroom activity. Now, that's not the first idea I had. The first idea was I just need to make something interactive. But then because I had weeks to prepare for this lesson, it gave me time to realize, like, to have that eureka moment and say, ooh, I think I'm going to use Desmos. And then actually have time to design a custom Desmos activity. Procrastination can really rob you of the time that you need to like prepare for things.
Got a couple big presentations coming up in the next month or so, and I've already drafted the outline, and I kind of go back and add things to the outline. I like Tiago Forte's building your second brain methodology, which basically means that once I have a task, I build a notebook for it. And as I grab things, I throw that into that notebook. So when I sit down with that notebook, everything's kind of already together and I'm already thinking on it. I think in the age of AI, we can't underestimate the importance of the human thought process. And the sooner we can start thinking on whatever that is that we have to do, the better off and the better product it's going to be and the more creative, because that's something unique that we bring. So Let's talk about how do you make yourself do what you don't want to do?
Before the podcast started, we were talking about a book that I just recently read called Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy. And when I tell my friends about this book, they're like, what does that mean, eat that frog? And so he talks about in the book this idea that if you got up in the morning and you ate a live frog, that would be a horrible experience. But at least you would know that's probably the worst thing that you would have to do that day. So that's where the eat that frog metaphor comes from. And so that's something that I have really started doing, is the thing that I know I'm probably going to procrastinate on, just go ahead and do it. If it's something that I can do quickly, just knock it out. Or if it's something that I can't do quickly, then at least take the time to break it down into, those subtasks so that you have a plan moving forward. And I try to put dates to it, right? Like I try to, look at my calendar and say, okay, how long is it going to take me to get this done? And so that has really helped me to get more on top of the things that I need to be doing.
Well, and I've read before, as I've tried to help students with procrastination, that in some ways, some people can become adrenaline junkies with procrastination, and they get used to that adrenaline hit of pulling that all-nighter or whatever. So you reach a point where that adrenaline is just not going to get you through the excellent work that you need to do. How can we talk to others about helping them understand the importance of tackling those big jobs, eating those big frogs?
I think I've just gotten to a point where I am too old to be pulling all-nighters and being stressed out. You hit on it with the word excellent. We don't realize that when we don't give ourselves enough time to accomplish a task, we're not doing our best work. That's actually something that one of my college professors told me when I was working on my master's, because I was still procrastinating in my master's program. And this was back in 2009. I remember my major professor telling me at the time, Tinashe, once you get to a point where you stop procrastinating, you're going to be amazed at what you can do. You're not really tapping into your full potential when you're not giving yourself enough time. And that's the way I would put it. So every year I set like a manifestation goal for myself, like the word of the year. And so I knew this year that I wanted to defeat procrastination. And I realized that the opposite of procrastination is preparation. And so that has been kind of my mantra to myself, is how can I be prepared? I believe strongly in focusing my energy and my attention on attracting what I want and not what I don't want. So every day I don't procrastinate. I think, how can I prepare? What can I prepare for today? And if that's your constant mindset, how can I be prepared? I think even having that conversation with students. So I think if we reframe it in that way, that may help, folks make that jump to realize, maybe procrastinating isn't working for me.
There's a fantastic book, I'm only on chapter 2, called Hidden Potential by Adam Grant. And in this book, he's really talking about what are the things that if you teach people that they actually improve their performance. And they took 2 sets of entrepreneurs, and one group, they spent a week teaching them business skills. The other group, they spent a week teaching them proactivity, perseverance, tackling issues head on, which he calls character skills. Within 3 months, the ones that learned those skills were more profitable than those who just learned about business. And he makes this argument that when we teach people to be proactive, which can be done at any age, we teach people proactivity, or we teach them to hit issues head on. What goes with that is greater accomplishment, greater peace, greater a lot of things. So let me ask you this, Tinashe, what are you already seeing because you've been hitting your procrastination head on in terms of benefits to you as a person?
First of all, my grades. My grades are looking good right now. And I know that that's a direct result of me being more proactive with my work. One of the reasons why I decided to make preparation my goal in January is because I got a B. And in graduate school, a B is like, so when I got a B in the fall, I had to really look myself in the mirror. Sometimes things like that'll happen and you're like with your pitchfork and you're like, this is a grave injustice. And it wasn't that at all. I knew I knew that procrastination earned me that B. I think from an educator standpoint, especially working on a terminal degree, I know that I'm going to be using what I learned to teach others. And so I'm asking myself at this point in my career, am I being the kind of student that I would expect my students to be? Because how can I tell my students, these are my expectations, grade them accordingly, knowing full well that when I was a student, I wasn't giving it my full effort. And that's challenging. It's really challenging because I still have a full-time job. I still have my kids. I still have a life. So for me, it's still, even in the midst of all of that, I feel like when folks say I'm too busy, I don't have enough time, that's an even more of a reason for you to get really disciplined about how you manage your time and how you get things done, because it just adds stress on top of stress when you're not on top of everything. And I certainly don't want to say that like I've got it all figured out. I'm calling myself a recovering procrastinator. Every day I have to remind myself, okay, let's look at the to-do list. What can you knock out? Now that I'm actually tracking things instead of keeping them in my head, even when I say, oh, I don't have time to do this today. Now, like if something is due on the 1st, then I'm trying to get it done at least by like the 15th or the 20th. So if the 15th or the 20th rolls around and I'm like, oh, I don't have time to do this, I can put it off, but I'm still ahead of the game. I'm holding myself to a higher standard of getting things done earlier.
And now as we're done, whoever you are, I hope that you will use some of these tips and that you will be kind to yourself today. Think about something you like. Think about, do I like a candle? Do I like to watch a particular sporting event? Do I have a happy memory and want to look at an old scrapbook? Oh, there's so many ways to bring joy into your life. But my great-grandfather used to say, there's enough for everyone's need, but not everyone's greed. So self-care is not selfish. When I know that I'm in a good place and I'm healthy, and sometimes even when I'm not in a great place, but I know that I'm better off than my friend who needs me, then I get out and I help take care of others. And in some ways, the amazing thing is that taking care of others and being kind and being helpful, a lot of times is taking care of you yourself. So my prayer for you today is that you will take care of yourself. You'll focus on those spiritual practices and mental practices and physical health, that you'll get out and take a good walk, that you'll go and schedule an appointment with a friend that you haven't talked to in some time. Like I always say, you're not listening by accident. Pick up the phone, call a friend, set an appointment, to set a lunch date, set a dinner date, go see your mom or your dad. Moms and dads don't last forever, and neither do grandmas and grandpas. So we definitely want to get out there, take care of ourselves. But when we do, also remember that part of self-care is being connected to others.
Stay in the loop. Visit coolcatteacher.com. Visit coolcatteacher.com for the latest tips and trends. See you later, educators.
Thank you so much for listening. And these show notes can be found at coolcatteacher.com/talk self-care. If you want to be featured on a future show or know an amazing educator I should interview, call and leave a voicemail at 777-783-2241.